The wind came low and mean across the prairie, carrying the scent of burned wood and something older, something like sorrow. His horse trudged slow through brittle grass, each hoof step kicking up dust that shimmered in the last orange light. The cowboy, hollow-cheeked and sun-seared, rode as if sleepwalking, reins loose, eyes tracking nothing in particular. He hadn't spoken aloud in days. Not since he buried his dog behind the shed and told no one. Up ahead, vultures wheeled, their shadows circling over a crooked patch of land. He squinted, then turned the horse toward them, spitting a trail of tobacco into the wind. Buzzards never circled for nothing. Death had a smell, and it pulled at his bones like a half-remembered sin. The wreck came into view slow, half-sunken wagon, the kind folks ordered when they had too many dreams and not enough sense. Its canvas flapped like a wounded flag. Scorch marks licked up its sides. The oxen were gone, likely stolen. The wagon wheels lay cracked and sagging, their iron rims stripped. Whoever did this took what they wanted and left the rest to rot. He dismounted with a grunt, knees cracking. The brush around the wagon whispered, dry leaves rustling like secrets. Then he saw her. A woman lay twisted in the grass just beyond the wheel ruts, barely more than a shadow. Black skin gone ashen. Dress torn and singed. Her lips were cracked open, her breath shallow, as if even the act of dying had become too much work. One hand still clutched a frayed Bible, its pages soaked and stiff from rain. He stood over her, silent, just watching. The sky was turning copper behind him, clouds bunching low like fists. The woman didn't move, save for the flutter of lashes. But her eyes opened. She looked up at him, and for a heartbeat, neither of them existed in the present. She wasn't a fugitive or a stranger, and he wasn't a man with blood on his hands. They were just two people the land hadn't swallowed yet. He knelt, slow as a prayer, and reached for her wrist. Weak pulse. Not good, not dead either. Damn it, he muttered. He could have walked away. God knew he'd done worse. There was a time when he might have called for help, but the nearest town didn't have help. Not for women like her. Not for men like him. He carried her to his horse and wrapped her in his coat. She didn't weigh much. Not from lack of strength, but from a life that hadn't given her enough reason to stay. The ride back was silent, save for the creak of saddle leather and the whistle of wind through brittle trees. He kept glancing down to see if she was still breathing. She was. Barely. His shack sat on the far edge of a dead river, a lean-to patched with sheet metal and old barnwood. Smoke hadn't risen from its chimney in days. He kicked the door open with his boot and laid her down on the cot, stripping off the burnt layers of her dress like peeling bark from a dying tree. He found a jug of water and a cloth, dabbed her forehead, made tea from prairie mint, and forced it past her lips. She coughed, choked, swallowed. Night fell like a hammer, hard and sudden. Coyotes cried in the distance, sounding more human than not. He sat in the corner by the fireplace with a rifle across his lap, watching her breathe. Her lips moved in the dark. A name. It wasn't his. Maybe it was the man she meant to marry. Maybe it was someone already dead. He didn't ask. She burned with fever through the night, tossing and mumbling in a voice that slid between languages. One moment English, the next something older, thicker, from across oceans he'd never seen. Her words conjured shadows, and he sat through it all like a sentinel in the ruins of a forgotten chapel. Come morning, her eyes opened again. She didn't scream. That surprised him. Most people would, waking up to a strange man and the stink of old whiskey in a place that barely qualified as shelter. Instead, she blinked once, then whispered, "Where am I?" He didn't answer right away. He poured water into a chipped mug and held it to her lips. She drank with slow, cautious sips. Then she met his eyes again. "You saved me," she said. "Didn't mean to." "Why'd you do it?" He looked at the floor, then the fire. "Didn't plan that either." Her breath caught on a dry laugh. "You always talk like that?" He shrugged. "Only when I'm not saying nothing." She lay back down, eyes closing. Her breathing had steadied, but her face was still too pale, too hollow. She looked like someone half done being alive. He didn't know what she'd been through, but the land had marked her,
just like it had him.
Later, he went outside to chop wood. The axe thunked into the stump with a rhythm that let his mind go blank. He remembered a different woman, hair the color of wheat, a boy who'd never made it past 5. Their names didn't matter anymore. Only the silence left behind. When he returned, she was asleep again, Bible resting on her chest. The fire cracked soft. Rain tapped against the tin roof, like fingers trying to remind him of something he'd promised to forget. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or what trouble followed her. But trouble had a way of finding this place. Always had. The earth here was stained with secrets. He watched her for a while, face lit gold by firelight. Not with desire, but with something quieter. Something like understanding. She was running from something. He could see it in the way her fists stayed curled even in sleep. And he wasn't running anymore. Just waiting for the end to find him. But maybe now it wouldn't come so fast. Maybe this time, it would have to knock. The snow came early, like it was in a hurry to cover something up. It fell soft at first, dusting the dry grass and empty fence posts, but by the second day the whole prairie had gone quiet beneath a heavy white hush. Inside the cabin, the fire hissed and spat as wet logs dried slow in the hearth. She sat at the table, sewing a rip in the sleeve of one of his old shirts, though the needle trembled a little between her fingers. He moved about with his usual economy, silent, spare gestures, as though every step might stir some ghost best left asleep. She watched him, not openly, just enough to learn his rhythms. How he always checked the window before pouring his coffee. How he never turned his back to the door. How his hand lingered just a second too long near the rifle on the wall when the wind changed. He didn't talk much. When he did, it was short,
direct.
Nothing wasted. She asked him once what people used to call him. He looked at her for a long time, like she'd asked something dangerous. Doesn't matter now. You don't want me to know? I don't want to remember. She didn't press again. Not because she feared him, but because she understood. Names had weight. The wrong ones could bury you. She had a few of her own she'd left behind in burning towns and back alley rooms where men looked at her like she was something they'd paid for and didn't like the price. Still, she felt stronger now. The bruises had faded. Her legs carried her with less ache. She could walk outside a little. The cold bit at her skin but didn't sink through. She cleaned the stovepipe, fed the chickens he'd all but forgotten, and even fixed a hole in the roof with oilcloth and nails. One evening, while gathering firewood near the edge of the trees, she found a small cross beneath the willow. It was weathered, carved from 2 sticks bound by wire. The earth there was slightly raised, a shallow mound softened by snow. No name, no date, just silence. She didn't touch it, just stared until her hands turned numb. That night, she brought it up while they shelled beans by lamplight. "There's a grave by the tree," she said. His hands didn't pause. "Yeah. Someone you knew?" He scraped his thumb along a dry husk. "You don't want that story." "I might." He looked up. "It won't make you feel better." "I'm not looking to feel better." He set the bowl down and leaned back in his chair, the firelight licking across his face like it was trying to read him. When he spoke again, his voice was flat. Not cold, just emptied. "Wife and boy. Winter 5 years ago. Fever came hard. Took him fast. I didn't get him to town in time. After that, town didn't see me again." She nodded, not because she pitied him, but because grief always recognized its own. She could see the edges of it in the way he never let the fire die. In the way he slept with his boots on. The next day, a rider came. He was young, wearing a badge too big for his chest and a mouth full of tobacco. Said he was looking for a colored woman, runaway bride from Bitter Creek. Said her intended had turned up dead with a stove poker buried in his throat. Left a big house and bigger family, wanting answers. The cowboy stood in the doorway, rifle resting casual in the crook of his arm. "Don't know anyone like that," he said. The deputy squinted past him, saw smoke from the chimney, the shape of someone moving inside. "You sure? Governor's offering good money for information." "I don't need money," Could buy yourself a better roof. This one leaks just fine. The deputy stared a moment longer, then sniffed and spat.
Well,
If you see anything strange, you let us know. The cowboy watched him ride off, not moving until the sound of hooves faded into snow. Inside, she stood near the window, pale but steady. Her eyes didn't waver. You lied for me, she said. He closed the door behind him. Didn't seem the deputy came for truth. He'll be back. Likely. She stepped closer, voice low. You want to know what happened?
no.
That made her pause. Why not? Because I already chose. She looked at him like he'd said something she wasn't ready to understand. She sat down at the table again, and he poured her a cup of coffee like it was just another morning. That night, she couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of the weight of what hadn't been said. She rose and found him sitting outside, wrapped in a coat, staring at the moonlight as it turned the snow into fields of broken glass. She sat beside him on the step, folding her arms tight against the cold. For a long while, there were no words between them, just the creak of wood and the hiss of wind moving through trees. I didn't just run, she said finally. I killed him. He didn't look at her. Figured. He was cruel. Thought buying me meant he could break me. He tried to brand me. Like cattle. She waited for his disgust. It didn't come. You do what you had to? I did what no one else would. He nodded, just once. The stars above them blinked, dim and watching. You think I'm cursed now? She asked, almost whispering.
No, he said.
I think you're still breathing. That counts for something. She looked down at her hands. They still bore the faint scars where ropes had bitten into her wrists. She thought of the grave by the tree, and the man beside her who had buried his past in frozen soil but still made space for someone else's pain. I used to believe God had a plan, she said. I used to believe I deserved one. Snow began to fall again, slow and quiet. She leaned her shoulder against his. Thank you, she murmured. He didn't answer. But he didn't move away, either. And for now, that was enough. The thaw came late that year, reluctant and sour, like it didn't trust the land to hold its warmth. The snow melted in slow veins, bleeding into the cracks of an earth too long starved of softness. With it came sound again, birds calling sharp in the morning, the creek finally whispering over stone. Life was returning in pieces, though no one could say for how long. She had taken to the fields early, tying her skirt at the knees and dragging a rusted hoe through stubborn soil. He watched her from the porch, sipping coffee that had turned bitter in the pot. Every motion she made was deliberate, driven not by optimism but resolve. She wasn't planting hope. She was planting the idea of a future, however small. He finally came down the steps, boots heavy in the thawing mud. She didn't stop working as he approached. You're turning the ground too shallow, he said. She wiped her brow with her sleeve. That's so. He nodded. Roots'll dry out come summer. She leaned on the hoe and smiled faintly. What makes you think I expect anything to grow here? Same thing that makes you bother doing it at all. They shared a look then, dry, wry, but full of something not quite laughter. A week ago, she hadn't let him close. Now she let his shadow fall across her without flinching. Later, they built a fence. Hammered nails through sun-warped planks, tied wire where the nails wouldn't hold. It didn't keep much out, but it was a shape to the world. A line drawn where before there'd been nothing but drift. One morning, they found the porch rail carved with a mark neither of them had made, a jagged X with a cross through the middle. He scraped his thumb across it, eyes narrowing. Scouting sign, he said. Someone's been watching. She looked out at the prairie. It seemed still. Too still. That deputy? Maybe. Or someone meaner. After that, he moved the rifle from the wall to the table. She didn't question it. Just started locking the door at night and sleeping with a blade tucked in her boot. He taught her how to shoot. They stood side by side behind the barn, the wind tugging at their coats. She held the revolver stiff, too tense in the elbows. You're trying to aim, he said. Don't. Just breathe. Let your bones do the work. She exhaled and fired. missed the bottle by a foot.
Again, he said.
By the fifth shot, she grazed the edge. It spun off the stump and landed in the dirt. She looked at him, triumphant. He just nodded. Good enough to scare someone, he said. Not good enough to stop him. She practiced until her hands ached. Not out of fear, out of defiance. Whatever was coming, she'd face it upright. That night, as she folded laundry by lamplight, she spoke without looking up. You ever kill a man who wasn't trying to kill you first? His eyes flicked to hers. That a question, or a confession? Both. He set his mug down, slow. There was a time, he said, when I'd kill for less than a reason. A look.
A lie.
A sack of coins someone never even earned. And now I try not to start what I can't live with. She nodded. I hope I can get there too. The silence between them deepened, but it wasn't empty. It was honest. 2 nights later, the rider returned. They heard the hooves at dusk, distant but direct. He stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. She followed, her face unreadable, knife tucked into her sleeve. It wasn't the same deputy this time. This man was older,
Thinner.
hat pulled low over mean eyes. Evenin', he called, his voice like rust over gravel. I believe you got something here that don't belong to you. She doesn't belong to anyone, the cowboy replied. The man laughed, swinging off his horse. That's not what her husband thought. She told me he was dead. Oh, he is, the stranger said. Problem is, he had brothers. And they don't take kindly to whores with knives. The word landed like spit in the dust. The cowboy didn't flinch. You alone? He asked. The man smirked. Not for long. The woman stepped forward, quiet and still. Why are you really here? She asked. Closure, the man said. Maybe justice. Maybe just the shape of it. I didn't run because I was scared, she said. I ran because I wanted to live. Well, he said, thumbing the hammer of his pistol. We can fix that. The cowboy moved first. The shot cracked like thunder, close and raw. The stranger's pistol dropped from his hand before he could fire. He staggered back, blood blooming from his shoulder. Another horse neighed in the distance. Then 2 more. They brought more, she whispered. He pulled her back into the cabin, slammed the door shut. Back, he said. Get to the rear hatch. Go. I'm not running again, she said. This ain't running. It's surviving. But she didn't move. The first bullet splintered the window. The second lodged in the doorframe. He fired twice through the wall, scattering the attackers. She crouched near the hearth, breath ragged but eyes clear. Then, just outside, a voice rang out, low, gravelly, unfamiliar. Give us the girl, and you live. No deal, the cowboy answered. You're gonna die for her? I already did once. A pause. Then another shot. The cowboy ducked, reloaded. She reached for the rifle. Let me. He hesitated, then passed it over. When the next man came through the window, she didn't miss. He fell in the firelight, gun slipping from his fingers, face frozen in surprise. She didn't tremble, didn't cry, just looked down at the man she'd killed, then at the cowboy. I'm done running, she said. He looked at her like seeing her for the first time. Outside, hoofbeats retreated into darkness. Not a surrender, but a delay. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was a promise. He stepped to the window and watched the horizon. They'll be back, he said. She came to stand beside him. Then we'll be ready. And for the first time in years, he believed it. The night before the storm, the prairie went still in that way it does when something is about to break. No wind, no birdsong, just the creak of dry wood settling under its own weight, and a silence so full it rang in the ears. He stood outside the cabin, staring out into the dark where the land blurred into sky. Somewhere out there were men coming to kill him, or her, or both, and he couldn't say he blamed them, not entirely. Vengeance was a language he understood, and mercy was one he'd only begun to speak. But something about the air tonight said it wouldn't end in words. Inside, she packed supplies into an old saddlebag. Extra bullets. Dried beans. the deed to land that had never truly been his but felt like it now. She paused at the cracked mirror above the wash basin, her own reflection sharper than she remembered. Eyes clear, jaw set, not afraid, not anymore. Just ready. When he came in, she didn't speak right away. He shut the door, bolted it. "Ryder came up from the South Ridge," he said. "Didn't get too close. Just looked, then left." She nodded. "They're circling." He took off his coat, set the rifle on the table. Their eyes met. "We could run," she offered, soft but firm. "Tonight. Just disappear. Won't matter. They'd follow. And we wouldn't stop looking over our shoulders. We built something here." She stepped closer, hands brushing his. "Then we fight." There was no kiss, no declaration, just a breath shared between two people who'd come too far to flinch now. By morning, the sky was bruised with stormlight. Thunderheads rolled like cavalry across the plains, and in the distance came the low rumble, not thunder. Hoofs. 3 riders at first. Then 5. Then more. Dust kicked up around them like smoke. At the front rode the man with a scar, a pale ridge across his cheekbone like someone had once tried to carve the hate out of him. He raised a hand. The group slowed. In the cabin, she watched through the slit in the shutter, jaw tight. "That him?" he asked. She nodded once. "The brother." "I count 9. He checked his rifle. "I've done worse odds." She loaded her pistol. "Not lately." The scarred man shouted, voice carrying across the distance. "You had your chance. This is justice." The cowboy stepped out into the open, rifle across his back, palms empty. "You ever stop to wonder if the man you're avenging was worth the blood?" "Don't need to wonder. Blood's blood. He was ours." The wind picked up. Rain teased the edges of the clouds. "You take her," the cowboy said. "You undo whatever she's built. That what you came for? To take something that's finally trying to live?" A different rider cursed and raised his rifle. The scarred man held out his arm to stop him. "She killed my kin," he said. The woman stepped out then, beside the cowboy, pistol at her side. "Your kin tried to brand me. Called it love." That gave the men pause. A few exchanged glances. One looked down. "I didn't kill for hate," she said. "I killed because no one came when I screamed." The storm cracked then, thunder rolling low and long. Too late for speeches. The scarred man growled, and with a sharp whistle, the riders moved. The first shot split the wind, striking the fence post beside the cowboy. He dropped to one knee, rifle up, and fired once. A rider fell. She moved beside him, quick and sure, firing steady, not wasting a bullet. Another man dropped. Then chaos. Horses reared. Gunfire lit the gray air. Rain began to fall in streaks, streaking the smoke, turning dirt into slick clay. One man reached the porch, boot on the step, and fell to her blade before his hand met the doorknob. She didn't hesitate, didn't shake, just turned and fired again. Inside, the cabin caught fire. A lantern knocked over in the struggle. Flames crawled up the walls, licked the roof like they were hungry for history. The cowboy, bleeding from a graze to the shoulder, pulled her back. "We're losing the house." "We're not losing the fight," she said. He looked to the scarred man, who now stood alone, gun empty, face streaked with rain and ash. Around him lay silence, his riders scattered or dead. "You wanted blood," the cowboy called. "You got it. Now go." But the man didn't go. He drew a knife. The cowboy raised his rifle. The woman raised her pistol. The scarred man took one step, then another, closer, reckless, as if death was the only brother he had left. Then a crack of thunder, and he dropped. Neither of them had fired. Behind the man, an old rider sat on a sway-backed horse, smoke curling from the barrel of a carbine. The rider said nothing, just tipped his hat to them, then turned and rode away into the rain. Later, when the fire had eaten the last of the roof, they stood in the blackened shell of the home they'd shared. She leaned on him, hand gripping his coat. "We built it once," she said. "We'll build again." He looked down at her, eyes full of something raw and quiet. Not joy. Not even relief. Just truth.
Yeah, he said. We will.
As the rain cooled the ashes and the sun cracked open behind the storm, the two of them stood side by side, not in triumph, but in defiance. Not everything had survived, but they had. And that was enough to begin again.